I've always thought I would have done great in the 80s. If that's what I grew up. I'm pretty convinced I would have been a rock star. I think that
You think you could have done it?
yeah, I think I have that charisma. It's rock star. The whole rock star thing's different nowadays. It's a lot harder to.
Are there? Who is a new rock star? I can think of pop stars.
Yeah, like that's the thing is that rock isn't even. It's not what it used to be. Like rock is now mostly more alternative. Like for popular stuff, it's kind of a mix between, what rock was and kind of more new age music, like pop or hip hop and stuff like that. I mean, of course, I know there's a lot of rock bands out there, and there's a lot of
but a lot of them have been around for a while.
Yeah, most of them are like ones that have been around for a while, and then there's I'm not shutting off the whole genre, but I recognize that there are actual still rock bands out there, especially heavier rock bands, but it doesn't have the popularity.
Yeah, yeah. In the 90s, alternative rock was, it was everywhere.
Yeah,
and it really is rock and roll. I think, in fact, it probably brought rock back closer to its roots. Alternative music did.
Yeah.
Getting away from the arena rock, which was kind of, is like adrenaline infused pop music, really. And the 90s gets back to the bluesy, and you get the punk coming in again and all that. There's that one band, oh man, they sound like Led Zeppelin. That's part of the problem, is they just sound like knockoff of Led Zeppelin. You know who I'm talking about? They had a few good songs.
I think I know who you're talking about.
But they haven't really done much for the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. Everyone was really excited about them for a while because they did. They sound just like Led Zeppelin. But then they kind of, lost their steam or something. I don't know.
Ran out of original content that sounded like someone else's content.
Yeah. Anyway.
But no, the stadiums, the big stadiums, adrenaline.
Oh yeah.
I think that's where I would have been in my element. If I knew how to play guitar,
you need an arena.
Yeah, I would.
I don't think they'll see this, so I'll go ahead and talk about it. Are we recording?
Yeah, but I can cut this part.
Okay. So I was, my wife and I were invited at Christmas time to the Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, it was a spectacle. There was fire everywhere, and very, very loud. Well, not as loud as I thought it would be, to be honest, but loud. And I don't know how many different stages they had, people getting on them and going up. But as I tried to make sense of what they were singing about, it was all really, I don't know, it was really deep, man. And we laughed, and I said, that was like the essence. I said this to my wife, not to the people who invited us. It was like the essence of sound and fury signifying nothing. It was at one point they had, so they're playing this song, and I can't even remember what it was about. But while they're playing it, they have these ladies come out and dancing, like, woo! And then they have these screens. The whole stadium was filled with screens.
Oh, that's cool.
Well, except it had things like teddy bears marching and things.
Well, that's kind of weird.
It was weird. And this one, they had helicopters flying, and then you had dragons flying to meet the helicopters, and you had dancing girls. And I think they were singing a Christmas song.
But you couldn't tell.
I can't remember it, at least. But it was so bizarre. And then as the dragons on the screens approached the helicopters on the screens, then when they met, these flames, they shot up like 20 feet high in the air, and it was a spectacle.
You know what's crazy? People loved that stuff.
People loved it. Everyone was going nuts. And I was just like, well, what is this all about? So
Spectacle. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. The biggest rock concert I went to is when Motley Crue came here at Ender.
That would be cool.
That was really cool. And well, of course, I knew all the songs, so it was like easy to get into. And
what's your favorite Motley Crue song?
They were I'm gonna say "Smoking in the Boys' Room" because
that's a good one.
In middle school, I was in a class called rock band. It was an extracurricular, but I was in this course, and we spent the semester, prepping to put on a rock performance. And most songs, I was lead singer. I learned how to play bass for one song, and I couldn't even tell you what song it is now. I can't think of it, but it was a pretty simple bass guitar part. So it was just like bam, 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 bam. And then just that on repeat the whole time. But I was like, yeah, I can play, But no, definitely, I was definitely, again, see, I was the lead singer. I'm telling you, that would have been my element.
You were made for this.
Yeah, but the coolest part, this is
Born Too Late.
That's why I like that song. That's why it's my favorite. But my actual favorite's probably Home Sweet Home.
I'm trying to remember that one.
And
I think when I think of Motley Crue, I think girls.
That one's good. Yeah. But there's in that performance, they had a main stage at the side of the arena, and then when they started doing Home Sweet Home, and the guitar, starts with the guitar riff, and then they started moving what looked like they were going into the audience, and I was like, it's crazy, like they're actually, and then they got to like the center of the arena. And then I was like, there's no audience right there. I wonder why. And then all of a sudden, like the platform lifted. And as he was like doing the chorus, I'm on my way, set me free, home sweet home.
Okay, yeah.
And then at the big tonight is when like it hit the very top of the auditorium. Like they were probably like 40 feet in there, if not higher. Like they were way up there, and then like it wasn't fireworks, but it wasn't fire. It was like almost like just 1,000 sparks. Like it was were like going off. So visually, it was very cool, and it made sense with what they were doing. There weren't any marching teddy bears. The strangest thing I saw in Interest Bank Arena was I saw Wiz Khalifa, and he sent giant inflatable joints, probably, like the length of this room, just out into the crowd, and everyone was tossing them around.
Was that a good show?
I like his music. So it was a good show. And Kevin Gates went before him, a few other people. It was like wiped the lid, but he was the biggest name there. Yeah. But so that was probably the strangest part. And overall, I think I was glad that I was up like in a booth and not down there. Like I'm sure parts would have been fun, but it also looked pretty wild down there.
Did you get high where you were?
So me and my friend were kind of conspirators here, and we're pretty sure that he probably lit up and put it right into the front of the AC system so that it was blowing into the auditorium. Because you could just smell it being in there. I think everyone got a little secondhand high at that show. I can't prove anything, but
you probably didn't have to. I imagine there were enough people lighting that.
Yeah, that is
very cool. So this week we're doing Christ 3, which is a weird title.
Yes, it had me confused when you first introduced it.
But it's because it's the sequel of 2 other Old English poems.
Presumably Christ and Christ 2. And then we looked at Christ 3.
That's right. Yes. It's actually a body of a whole corpus. I think it's the Exeter manuscript. Anyway, there are a bunch of these religious Old English poems. And so some of the oldest literature in English is actually, I would say, some of it is like reworked New Testament, and some of it is just devotional literature.
Yeah.
It reminds me of like a really good sermon.
This whole thing came off as a sermon. Well, so that I could try and get it better. in my head, you know. I
Mhm.
didn't have an audiobook version. I
Right.
read it out loud to myself.
Oh, very good.
And
What was that like?
It felt like I was giving a sermon. There were a few people in the room. I finished it earlier today, and you know, like I think I started to get into it, not even
Very
realizing.
good.
Like I stood up at one point, and I was just, and a few of them looked at me like, he's finishing his reading, I guess. I don't know what's happening.
Did anybody repent? Did you have an altar call at the end? You did.
I stood up at
It's
the
a
end.
missed opportunity.
Yeah, I stood up at the end and said, I gotta go meet Umbarger. See you guys.
So, I had never heard of this poem until a few weeks ago when I was doing a little bit of research on. I was trying to justify reading Beowulf with you, and I found an article that mentioned this. In basically, the argument of this journal article I found was that the author of Beowulf surely knew this poem, and having read it, I don't know if there's a literary dependence, but it's at least drawing from a common milieu of imagery.
Yeah,
that I think is for certain.
Yeah, I think you mostly see the connections towards the beginning of this poem.
Yeah,
toward the end, then especially toward the end is when it starts to feel a lot more like a sermon, and it gets repetitive, but not in a bad way.
Right. No, I would agree. But if you're sleepy, it's kind of hard to get through, just to be honest.
Yeah. No,
because it is repetitive. But yes, but it's very rhetorically solid and skillfully put together. It's kind of like a tapestry that's carefully, like good poetry has an architecture to it, and this one certainly has that. Yeah, and the way it did you notice it's not exactly told chronologically?
I got confused at one point because I think it might have been the jump from 4 to 5 was at 5 we jumped back again.
Yeah.
To earlier.
I think that's not right.
Yeah, but they don't make those transitions clear. It's like a paragraph in. I was like, didn't he talk about this earlier? I was like, oh, we're doubling back.
Yes,
that's what's happening.
It's kind of like again, a lot of preachers when they're preaching a sermon. Having been a preacher myself, sometimes it's hard to land that plane. So you go, take another. But this one's actually better. This is not just sloppily put together. It's actually done on purpose, so that you revisit it and you meditate on it.
Yeah, you can tell it's methodical.
Oh yeah. Well, should I read just the opening of it?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the beginning of it, especially, we were talking about this. It sounds very much like Beowulf in some ways. Before I read this, just to recall that one of the things that Beowulf mentions a lot of times is destruction by fire. So Herod is doomed to be burned. We don't actually see that happen in the poem, but Beowulf prophesies that this is going to happen. And then we're supposed to know that it does. It happens. Beowulf made a prophecy. Beowulf knows. Beowulf knows. I was thinking about this. Beowulf is kind of like Bo Jackson. Yeah. Do you know Bo Jackson, Bo knows, in the 90s? Because he played football and professional baseball. Yeah. He was on the Raiders and the Royals. And so those Nike Bo knows commercials. And you were talking about like how Beowulf can just do just about anything. Yeah. It's like, anyway. Bo knows. You can say the same thing. Beowulf knows. It doesn't sound as good. So, he makes this prophecy. And then, of course, we have the dragon coming out and burning everything up. And then the other thing is that the 3 monsters that show up in Beowulf, there's some other lesser minor monsters, but the main monsters, they all come upon people in their sleep. And so listen to this, and I think this will bring all that to mind. Put your best preacher voice on. And then the mighty day of the mighty Lord shall overmaster the earth dwellers with fear in the middle of the night, and with his power the radiant creation just as a corrupt a corrupt harmer, a bold coming thief, who often comes in darkness, in the black night, suddenly seizes those bound in sleep, sorrowless men, unready earls assailed with evil. So upon the mountain of Sinai, there will come a great and powerful people, true to the measurer, bright and blissful. To them the fruits shall be given. I don't know if that satisfied you.
No, that's good. That's
I didn't get to work up to it very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd have to read the whole thing to really end.
Yeah, by the end it'd be really awesome, I promise. So what's interesting here, okay, there's all kinds of things just in that very short bit that I read. So you have the bit about the fire. Did you mention fire yet?
I didn't mention fire yet, but we slumber.
Okay, slumber. Okay, yeah. So we haven't gotten to the fire yet, but here you have all the earth dwellers are sleeping right in the middle of the night, and then comes the mighty Lord with all of his great and powerful people. So he comes with this army, and they're just sleeping there, and he overcomes them. And what's really bizarre about this, I think, is you use this metaphor for Jesus and the angels and the saints. That's what it's describing, is the very end of the world. But it's a really negative metaphor. And this comes from Scripture. Of course, Jesus says that he will come like a thief in the night, which, and Jesus loves to do that, to use kind of weird, perplexing images to kind of, for instance, he tells this parable about this really, he's a scumbag of a steward. He's like, go be like that guy, and the point is not to be shrewd and manipulative and conniving. The point is to be generous with goods that aren't even yours. Mm-hmm. So it has this other point, but he uses intentionally an immoral hero of the story to kind of trip us up. And it's kind of what he does when he says, I'm going to come back and I'm going to be like a thief in the night. Typically, you don't want thieves to come visit you.
In the night.
Especially in the night. And the point is that you can come, when Jesus comes, you can welcome him as somebody that you want to see, or he can sneak up on you. He's coming either way.
Yeah.
And if you're not ready for him, it's not going to be a pleasant experience. It'll be more like this. And so we have all these, these are terrifying experiences, descriptions. A bold coming thief who often comes in darkness in the black night. This thief isn't just coming and stealing your stuff. Suddenly seizes those bound in sleep. So he's actually attacking the people in the house.
Seizing the people.
Yeah. Sorrowless men, so people who don't have a care in the world, he's going to grab and he's going to give them some sorrow here. And unready earls assailed with evil. They're not ready for this evil that's coming upon them. And so then he's going to bring, and it's not just him, he's bringing the whole army here. That also reminded me a little bit of when Beowulf and his company come to Herod, and you have the guard there, everybody's asleep inside, and he's like, who are you all? And we don't mean any harm. He's like, okay. But he's nervous because he's out there and there's a whole army of people. But and then that imagery just continues through the poem. This is described as a terrifying experience.
Yeah, there's all of the constant imagery of fire and death and doom.
Yeah, everything is going to be burned up.
Mm-hmm. And so one of my this one's frightening, but also beautifully written.
Mm-hmm.
This section down here on fire. Then shall every creature, beast, and fowl be taken by the deathly flame. The darkened fire shall be ferried across the earth, a welling warrior. As before the waters flowed, the agitated tides at that moment in the fiery bath, the sea fishes shall be burned, deprived of their swimming. Every weary wave beast shall be wasted, the water burning like wax.
Oh, and all the alliteration there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Like that was
yeah.
My English major started tingling. I was like,
yeah. And so the translator of this, I'm trying to remember his or her name, but they've done a good job of transferring that alliteration, because the Old English poetry likes to use that sort of alliteration and some assonance, but usually it's more typically the alliteration. Yeah, that was wonderful.
Yeah, that imagery, water burning like
Right.
wax. If you think about, you know, if you light a candle, like it's a little like wax as it burns, like, you know, oozes down, comes down the side. You're thinking of water, like you're looking at a body, like it's not just evaporating, but like literally, like water itself is melting away.
Right. Oh yeah.
Like,
yeah. And then the poor fishes and things that are just burning up. And I mean, also, I mean, for these people, the sea was, I mean, it was a part of their livelihood. It was also this place of mystery and of threat. I mean, things like Vikings come over the sea, but apart from that, monsters. I mean, most of the monsters in Beowulf aren't sea monsters, but we hear about a few sea monsters.
Yeah.
And so not even they can withstand this.
Well,
yeah,
one person can.
One
person wasn't scared of the sea.
But he died.
Yeah.
So, and of course, all of this about the world being ended in this burning conflagration comes from, I think it's Second Peter talks about how the judgment that's coming on the world. The first time God destroyed the world with water. The next time He's going to destroy it with fire. So this is right out of the Bible. But what's new here is, you know, these sort of phrases just kind of get thrown out without any explication. There's not any. The person who's written this has meditated on this and thought about what will this look like, and they've done their very best to describe this.
Yeah.
And it's an awesome, terrifying poem for that reason.
But I lost where I was going. Let me go to a new thought then. But no, the whole thing is, even when we jump to like what's actually happening next with Christ in this poem, as he's going on to the next step after he comes and gathers the people, and after that, it's in between each of those is just greater description of fire burning across the earth, and civilization, fire, forest, fire, nature's fire, the waters, we saw fire, like, and in between each of these, and then it jumps back to like, okay, now here's what's happening with Christ and humanity, and then back to that fire's still going, the fire's not stopping. Right.
Yeah, and after he judges the people, then some of those people are consigned to the fire. Yeah, they've it's hard to understand. Like, it looks like some of them were destroyed by the fire already, and then they've been raised up, and then they're like, back you go.
Yeah,
here's your second dose of fire.
That's okay. There was the point where he was like, and those that like have already been consumed or doomed or burned were brought back so that they could be brought to judgment once more, and then tossed back into the fire. And I was like, this is dark and horrifying.
Oh, that is.
Well, and then toward the end of the poem, when after the judgment has been decided, it's the way it's described where they go to hell is like the ground opens up like a trap door beneath them, and then they just descend to, I mean, live eternally with demons and damnation. And then we get a lot more fire imagery down there, because you know that's all we know is fire and brimstone.
There is lots of fire. Yeah, no, I think that image of the earth opening to swallow them up is taken from the story of Korah and Dathan. Do you know this? So in the book of Numbers, and it goes along with this pretty well, you have a couple guys. Korah is a Levite, but he's not content to be a Levite. He wants to be a priest. He's like, why do you, Moses and Aaron, why do you get to be in charge of all this stuff? Why don't we get to do cool stuff, like offer sacrifices? And basically, they have this sort of priest showdown. So Aaron and his sons, they get out and they offer incense before the Lord. And then Korah and his gang do the same thing. And while Korah is worshiping, the earth opens up and then fire comes out from the presence of the Lord and devours everyone who's not swallowed up by the earth. And so it's perfect imagery for what he's going to do here.
Sounds like he lost the showdown.
He lost. That's right. And then what they do is they go through and they collect all of the censers of the people who were burned up, and they hammer them into plating to put on around the altar as a reminder of what happens to people who rebel against God and his priests. So every time you would go to worship God, you see those. You're like, oh, you're like,
yikes.
Yeah. So there's I think part of the imagery here, like referring to that story, part of it is saying, don't rebel against Christ, don't rebel against his church. There are consequences for that, and also maybe just picking up on, that's a really dramatic story that people probably had heard preached on, and just kind of tying it all together. Like, you saw it happen once, it's going to happen again. Yeah.
Isn't that an interesting, I'd say, theme or type of imagery? Like, not just like that hell is literally beneath us.
Yeah.
Because even in, we talked about a little bit when we were talking about Babel, that and even in the Greek and Roman stories, like they would descend down into the earth, and then that's where hell was located. And then
Hades, Sheol.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and then in mythology, when Hades takes Persephone, it's literally she's just out in the pasture, and then the ground opens up.
That's true.
And he comes from hell and brings her down.
That's a little bit like Korah and
yeah, that's what that story made me think of, that moment when he opens up and grabs her.
I had never thought of that. That's interesting. The language about the story of Korah is that they went into Sheol alive, which is exactly what's happening in this judgment scene.
Yeah.
So typically we think of people dying before they go to hell. These people are going alive.
Yeah. It's interesting that it's always depicted to be like, it's not a separate plane, it's not a separate world. It's depicted to be right below us.
This isn't Doom.
Which
right.
Yeah. But then even Norse mythology, it's depicted as a completely separate realm, right? But still, if at Niflheim, the only imagery you get is in the ground.
Right.
And that's where, so even though it's a separate place, it's still within that earth of that world, and it's underground.
And it's not, let's say, another planet or dimension. It's like because they kind of conceive of reality as being in layers, right?
Yeah. So
we are in Middle Earth here, Midgard, and so you have the upper Earth, and then that'd be in the lower Earth. Is that right?
Yeah, something like that. But it's still it's not like you can physically go from one to the other. It takes a special form of magic. The way they have it's very cool but complicated. It's weird.
Yeah,
you have to
I don't know much about Norse mythology.
You gotta take the Bifrost. You gotta go through the bridge.
See, that's my problem. Is I've read a little bit of Norse mythology, and then I've watched too many Marvel movies,
and it gets convoluted. You're like, what is it actually?
Right? Because they're not exactly the same. The only thought that comes to mind with this, like, why do we think of hell as being below us? Whenever I talk about this, I think about like Looney Tunes or Tom and Jerry cartoons, where you see like Tom and Jerry get smacked on the head, and then you see his ghost go through all the earth, and then he winds down, and there's a devil down there, and then the devil pokes him with it, and he jumps back into his body. And, it's exactly like that, I'm sure.
Yeah, like there's a very dark episode where the whole time, like Jerry's not even a part of it. You're following Tom, like through the spiritual journey of where he dies and he goes all the way up to heaven, and then a few other animals are being judged before him, and then it's his turn, and then they're like, no, like you messed up, you're a sinner, like unless you can go redeem yourself with this mouse. And then he goes down, and then Jerry's not willing to forgive him or like allow him to give him a chance to like show kindness and redeem himself. And then like time's up, and then that's when like the ground opens up and they come out and grab him, and you see the fire and spewed, and then it shows him like boiling down in hell as the devil's like prodding him with a pitchfork. Like as a kid, it was just like, that was a weird Tom and Jerry episode. But looking back on it, it's like, wow,
I've got to find
what happened with the writers that day? They must have felt very.
It sounds awesome.
Very bad about themselves. It's very. I'd have to watch it again, but like looking back on it, I remember it very well. It's very well done, but it's not your typical like slapstick. They fight each other, do tricks. Comedy episode. It's very
Tom goes to hell.
Yeah, but it goes to heaven at first, gets refused, gets told a chance at redemption, fails, not even to his own fault. Like,
there you go. You're gone. I need to see that one. Okay. Well, obviously, Tom and Jerry don't have the last word on theology.
Yeah, of course.
So, thank goodness. No, what I was about to say is I think this idea that hell is below us comes from the fact that we bury the dead in the ground.
Yeah.
And so we know practices of necromancy and things like this often involved offering food offerings into the ground, like in Ugarit. They found the tombs of the kings there typically have a little hole drilled into the tomb, and they would pour like wine and other good things down there, and in hopes that the soul would come back and like give them secrets from the other side. And we have poems about this, and we've actually found these holes and things. And there's some other pictures. Odysseus, he digs when he goes to the underworld, which is in Scythia, of course. I think that's in Ukraine. So he goes there, and it seems like there's a cave or something, but the way he really enters into Hades is by digging this ditch and sacrificing a black ram, if I recall, and its blood pours into the ditch, and then all of these souls come up from the earth. And I think the idea just is, it's just a very like kind of concrete idea. When someone dies, we put them in the earth. So that's where the souls are. And then what happens eventually? So you don't have ideas of like damnation after death don't become really pronounced until after the Jews are in Persia, in the Persian Empire. And we think this is maybe a borrowing from Zoroastrianism. And they had a very complicated version of heaven and hell. So the souls of the just go on to receive their reward. The wicked are punished. And so the Jews begin to talk more in terms of that happening. What the Jews add that I don't think was in Zoroastrianism is the doctrine of the resurrection. So this idea that this is going to happen in some future date when everyone is raised back to life. And then what Christianity does is it takes all of this and makes it all about Jesus. So Jesus has come to rescue us from this fate. And if you don't take his offer of salvation, well, it sucks to be you. Like, this is kind of where you get this. The other thing that happens as well with all of this. So for Easter, Catholics on Holy Saturday, we meditate on this line from the Apostles' Creed that says Jesus descended into hell. But when we talk about hell there, we're not talking about the lake of fire and all this stuff. We're talking about the abode of the dead. And we believe that Jesus, whatever this looks like, we've talked about this a little bit, he rescues especially the righteous souls, the souls of Israel, and brings them into paradise with him. And all the pagans would be like, who's that? Like they don't really. And then, so now we would say, like when we die, there's an immediate judgment that happens to determine whether you go to be with the Lord, as St. Paul talks about, to be absent from the bodies, to be present with the Lord, or whether you are consigned to Hades, which is now actually a kind of real hell. It's a waiting place for the condemned, waiting for the resurrection so that they can be brought back to life and thrown into the lake of fire.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that was a lot of explanation there for, what were we talking about?
Hell in general, fire.
Yeah.
But
where does this come from? Where this idea of it being in the middle of the earth?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is how in the story of Odysseus, there's more reverence to it, where he goes through this thing, and then the Aeneid, Aeneas just like pulls his ship up to a cave, and he's like, "All right, guys, I'm going in. I'll be back shortly."
He doesn't have to do anything.
Yeah, because he's Aeneas. The Romans were a lot more prideful. It was
we forget this black ram business.
But no, what's interesting, it just made me think about is how in Greek and Roman mythology, it's everyone goes to Hades, goes to hell, regardless. You're good, bad, whatever. And if you're bad, you're tortured while you're there. But for everyone else, like I remember when Aeneas walks down
unless
there,
you're like a demigod,
yeah,
you might get, but yeah.
But like Aeneas heads down there, and then like his dad and his friends, like a few people turn around and go, "Oh, hey boy, what's going on?"
Right.
We're just chilling in this dark and gloomy place for the rest of our lives. It's not too bad. It's not too bad. I was just sitting here staring at that stalactite because we are on the ground. But how have you been? How's the world up there?
But there's an interesting people down there.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like like it's still the same. Like it's darkness. It's underground. I guess there's no fire where they're at, but and then they're just like chill with one another.
There's no damnation
in
their stories.
Yeah, well, except for the people.
Well, the other thing that you get in some of these older, this would be Greek literature. The mystery religions do have a version of like heaven and hell. So the souls of the just then get to go to the Elysian fields, which is more like heaven.
Yeah.
So that would be a later development. It's quite early. So the Demeter mysteries, they would have had these. And so what was crucial there was to offer the right sacrifices in this life, to go through this initiation rite, so that when you died, the gods would recognize you as like being worthy to go with them. And there's some really interesting texts that we have. Most of them are pretty fragmentary. There's one it describes what you see after you die. And it's basically like you're going to see this ash tree, I think it is, and it's growing next to this pool. And that pool, don't drink from that pool because that's a pool of forgetfulness. So take a left. It gives all these directions and things. It's fascinating because there's this idea that there might be something besides just the gloom of Hades available for certain people, not for everybody, probably.
Well, so then that's Dante's Inferno, dividing it all into sections where, towards the top, you get to hang out there. It's not so bad.
That's right.
You were a good pagan, so you can just chill and hang out with the other good pagans and talk and drink wine.
It's like the New York City side of hell.
Yeah.
You don't want to wind up on the Jersey side.
Yeah. Because that's down lower. You keep going.
I'm sorry if we have anybody listening from New Jersey. I'm sure it's a lovely place, but Anyway, that's so I've heard.
Yeah, but then again, he descends into the earth, so that same trope. And of course, I mean, for his story, we go through all. I'll put a map up here. We'll go through all the rings, and they come out the other side,
right,
to Mount Purgatory, where they then climb up this mountain, going to the levels of purgatory.
Yeah,
because heaven's in the sky.
Yeah, and what's interesting for Dante is, in order for him to make his way to heaven, he has to go through hell. Probably most of us don't get to do that.
Yeah.
In his point of view. But anyway,
he saw himself as a special case.
Oh, yeah. It's also a vision. So, but anyway, I don't know. I do think there is something about this though. That he has to go like through every level. Like no matter how terrible it is, no matter how terrifying, he has to like experience it all.
Yeah.
And then he can
he has to climb Satan himself to get to the other side to get out.
Yeah. Yeah. A terrifying thing. Yeah. All right. So we got to talk a little bit about damnation before we're done.
Yes.
Because we've talked a lot about hell now. And I'm sure there are probably some people listening to this thinking, Dr. Umbarger seems really delighted that there are people like going to roast for all eternity.
They're like, wow, that guy's really excited about his friends burning.
This Tom and Jerry episode is like really excited about it.
They're like, I recall he giggled when he said that. He giggled about the pitchfork.
So, but before we do that, the Jesus in Christ 3 makes it sound like it's a Rocky movie or something. But the Jesus in Christ 3, how is he different from other Jesuses you have known, Austin? Like, how would because this is really interesting to me.
The big thing that catches me is we get to a point in Christ 3 where it's no longer like a narrative, it's Jesus speaking.
Yes.
It's in his voice. And the one thing we got this imagery multiple times of him calling back to his sacrifice and being upon the rood, taking the spear and being crowned in thorns. We get this imagery multiple times within Christ 3. And the main time I remember him bringing it up is when he's casting judgment. He's already got all of the sheep over here, and now he's looking at the goats.
We don't hear much about the sheep.
Yeah, we mainly hear about the goats. And he's looking over all of them, and he's like, I did this for you. You stabbed me in the side. You put thorns upon my head. And I accepted it. That's what I wanted to do for you. And then even after all of that, you still didn't care.
Yeah. Ingrates.
Yeah, and he's it comes he's being very to meaning I don't want to be sort of like he's like you weren't grateful enough. You didn't appreciate the sacrifice. You lived your lives in this way in continually like in willing sin and turned your back to me, and it never it's rightful. Jesus isn't being mean or demeaning or derogatory in a bad way. Like,
but it's not nice either.
Yeah, like it definitely I'll say that's the main thing is Jesus being mean, which I guess how nice you're gonna. It'd probably be more mean to be nice to someone and say, by the way, you're burning down there forever. So
come over here.
We're gonna chit chat. So you guys didn't listen. You lived your lives wrong, and it's okay. It's okay. Well, you're gonna burn.
Is a judge being mean in our court system when he passes sentence on a criminal?
Depends on the judge.
Do you have experience?
No. Thankfully not. Although I got my jury summons a few weeks ago,
Oh,
so I have to wait to hear back for them. Fingers crossed. I prefer not going, but if I have to go, I want something juicy.
yeah.
I
I've never had an opportunity to sit on the jury.
really.
There've been a couple times where I had a conflict and I just asked if I could be released. And then there was one time I think it just wound up, there was something else that happened and so they didn't need me.
They were like, oh,
Yeah.
never mind. But yeah, no, like a lot of people complain about it, and I get it because equally I've got out of it before a few years ago. They called me, but at the same time, I think it's good if everyone sits in one.
Yeah,
time.
no, I kind of want to do it eventually. I wish I'd had the opportunity to do it already.
But I feel bad saying it now that I'm thinking about it. Like, why on earth would someone say I want to get a juicy case for someone said there was a murder, but they're guilty? But I want something exciting. I don't want the traffic ticket guy.
No, I understand. Yeah, I don't think it makes you a bad person. No, I don't think Jesus is being mean. He's very blunt, and it is emotional. There is so I think part of the reason it's written this way is to play on the emotions of us as we read it. And we're like, oh yeah, we did do that to him. And he has every right. I mean, we treat him like this. He can, he has every right to come back and get revenge now.
Well, and I think it's equally, they make it emotional on his part. Like he's hurt, he's speaking from the heart as he's doing this, and that's what makes it feel like mean's not a right word, but like it's mean, but that's what makes it feel like it's not. Is like it
is the dark side of Christ's love, for sure.
There you go. It's a good way to put it.
No, it's dark. It is frightful because, and I think the thing is, it's also, he did this to rescue us from this fate. I've done all of this. There's no reason you should have to go to hell. I've done everything. And he just kind of lists the things he suffered for that. So you wouldn't have to go there. And you still want to go there. Like, you still are choosing this rather than me. And so it's kind of like, enough's enough. And that's kind of it. This is the part that reminded me of the mystery play that we read early in the semester. Was this sort of I've been really super patient with you up to this point, and now the time I can only go so long. There has to be an end to all of this, and even though I'm sure that the people who wrote the mystery play had not read Christ 3, I don't think they did. You can see there's a common, there's a tradition here that they're drawing from that goes back to the same English take on judgment. This is different. It feels different than the apocalyptic literature. We've talked about that. These apocryphal apocalypses that are floating around. It doesn't sound the same as like a Latin take. Something from the eastern part of the church. There's a distinctly English way of thinking about the judgment, and I think a lot of it has to do with picturing Jesus as this terrifying judge and a warrior. There's a lot of casting him not as this. I think we tend to think of Jesus as being meek and humble of heart. He says this of himself in Matthew 11. So we know this is true of him, but we meditate on that like almost to the exclusion of other images. And this is what I really like about this poem, is it makes me think about Jesus in other ways. Jesus is not nice in this poem. He's coming not just like a thief in the night, but he's coming like a monster, really. He's not of this world. He's going to invade it. He's going to bring an end to it. That's a frightening thought. I mean, this is like B science fiction movie stuff.
Well, like the mystery play, what I felt like the main purpose the author had in writing this was to, put fear into people, like, to be like, make sure you're still being good Christians out there. You don't want to see this side of Jesus.
That's right. Yeah, you don't want to see this side of Jesus. I think that's a good way to put it. That said, I think we're in a different place than when this is written theologically. Mm-hmm. I think also, I was about to say I think people have different ideas about heaven and hell than they did back then. And because of that, there are things that have to be said that weren't said back then. Because I think back then they're still trying to establish this is a real possibility for you. And now I think the church, we got on board with that, and everyone thinks of this, but now we have these terrifying pictures of God as this judge who is like looking for reasons to send people to hell. Like you were talking about with Tom and Jerry. This reminded me, poor Tom is like, sorry, you don't measure up, bud.
Yeah.
Pull the lever.
Yeah, he was doing nothing but trying to measure up.
Right. And the picture we have here is not like that. This is Jesus. These people have been forewarned, and they have neglected the warnings that they've gotten. That's what this is talking about. Like these earls sleeping at their ease. That's the other thing, is the people this is really directed to, I think, are like the rulers, people who are in charge of things. You're mistreating the poor. You're mistreating your serfs, right? You're taking advantage of them. So there's a lot of emphasis on taking care of the poor and distributing your wealth and things like this. They're not talking to the poor peasants who are taking a little bit of comfort in the bottle, maybe something like that. Like you might hear today, it's saying you've got social responsibility. God put you in charge, and you're forgetting that there is another king that you're going to have to answer for. You are actually a suzerain. You are a vassal to another king, and you're going to have to answer to him for all the things you've done. I think that's the other thing that's going on here, and so it's trying to there's a political message here as well. But today, a lot of times we use hell as a weapon against certain classes of people that we don't approve of, right? And I think a lot of people consider hell to be like just this default thing that, unless you believe the exact right way, unless you do the exact right things, unless you are the exact right kind of person, this is what you have to look forward to. And like, you better hope that you catch God on a good day, kind of thing, right? And that is not who God is. God is doing everything possible to bring us into heaven. No one winds up in hell accidentally. This poem can come off that way a little, and I don't think that's the message there. But hell is a choice. And I think that's something that needs to be said. Have I talked at all? I'm trying to remember. Have I told you the story about if you listen to Michael Jackson, you're going to hell?
No. Yeah.
Okay. So I grew up with, I kind of thought that this Tom and Jerry thing you're talking about, this is why I'm laughing about it. I kind of thought that's how it was. Because when I was 7 years old, I was invited to a vacation Bible school, and the preacher there was this fire and brimstone guy. And so for a straight week, he was telling these like 6-7-year-old kids they're going to hell, and basically telling them God wanted to send us to hell. And first thing, like, does your mom wear pants? She's going to hell. And you are too. Are you reading something besides the King James Version Bible? You're going to hell. Do you listen to Michael Jackson? Well, it was 1984. Of course we were listening to Michael Jackson. That was all that was on the radio. And so he's like, yeah, every one of you is going to hell. Because you listen to Michael Jackson. And he sold this so well all through this week that at the end of the week, when he gives the altar call, of course we went up to, I don't want to go to hell.
Yeah.
And so he's like, okay, I'm so happy to see you up here, young man. Just repeat after me. And so I do this sinner's prayer thing with him. And I was like, yeah, right. Because you're telling me if God wants to send me to hell just because I've had, I've thought cuss words in my head, but I won't say them, because I've listened to Michael Jackson, because of all of these things.
Because my mom wears pants.
Right. If you're saying that God is looking for any excuse to send me to hell, and all I have to do is say these magic words after you, I was like, bullshit.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to hell. And that's what it felt like. And so I was miserable for the next 5 years. Because I really thought it was kind of like, I pictured God as trying to look for an opportunity when I sin to kill me.
You expect him to come in the night.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm picturing have you ever seen the Far Side cartoon where it has God, he's got this computer screen and there's this guy walking, whistling, and there's a piano dangling over his head. and God's keyboard, it has where the keypad is, it says smite. He's got a smite button. He's getting ready to hit it and smite the guy with the piano. I thought God had a smite button and that he was ready to unleash it on me for the least thing. And I was terrified of God. I hated God. I would never say I hated God because I was afraid he might smite me for saying anything.
But you thought it.
I thought it. Yeah, I didn't have a real love for God because I thought he was like an antagonist who was looking for a reason to send me to hell. And that's absolutely not who God is. And so I do think we need things like this poem to remind us of the other side. That Jesus warned about hell. Jesus wouldn't have talked about hell if hell didn't exist. But he also has done everything to keep us from going there. God loves us. He doesn't want to send us there.